Hi, welcome to FlyOn. I am a licensed falconer in the US, and probably the most common question I get is actually, can I pet it? The answer is no. But the second most common question I get is, how do you become a falconer? I'm going to break that all down for you in this video. Here we go. So first of all, this is my red-tailed hawk, Charlie. She is 13 years old now, I believe. She has a leg deformity that we found her with in the wild, so this is actually her normal, don't be concerned. I have a video about that, and I have lots of videos flying her and dealing with her, so you can go check those out. She's actually sitting on a flat wooden surface for now as a perch instead of my glove, because she's usually more comfortable on a flat surface with her foot deformity. So getting a falconry license is a very complicated process. Bare bones basics. I'm going to split it into 3 parts and talk about each one in depth. You have to take a test. You have to build a facility like the one behind me, but doesn't have to be exactly like that one. And you need to study with someone for 2 years under their wing. Well, no pun intended. You have to get a sponsor. So you have to do an apprenticeship with your sponsor. I'm going to break these down a little bit in this video, but then I want to have a fully expanded video about each of these topics as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put a shameless plug here to please subscribe if you'd like to see those broken down bits. Alright, but before you start getting into the test, the facilities, the sponsorship, you need to very clearly understand a few things, okay? First of all, not everywhere allows a falconry license. In the US, it can go state by state. Some states allow it, some do not. Or it can even go county by county. I'm not allowed to own some of the animals I have in the city right near me, but in my county, I'm allowed to have it. So you have to be aware of both federal laws, meaning nationwide, and state laws or even local laws that govern whether you can even have one of these animals. I don't know why she's screaming. I think she's hungry. I'm defrosting her food right now, so she's just gonna have to wait a minute. The second thing you need to understand is, don't get into this for the wrong reasons, okay? You are not gonna have an owl like Harry Potter. You'll probably never have an owl. These birds are for hunting, to hunt other animals. That means, ideally, you're gonna see them hunt and eat other animals live. You know what I'm getting at? So, and they can't help what they eat, right? That's what they do. And it can get very icky. It can get gross. You get stuff sprayed on you. Not intentionally, but inevitably, all right? So you've gotta be able to handle both the live animal prey thing, but also just the raw meat thing in general. I have a deep freezer full of food for Charlie. Mice, chicks, quail, so a freezer full of dead animals in my basement. And as a falconer, that's not creepy at all. It's a myth that you're gonna have them catch everything that they're gonna eat for the year, maybe for a couple days, whenever you take them hunting. It depends what you're hunting and the size of your bird, but you're gonna have to keep food for them and prepare food for them. And if they do catch something large, or you happen to acquire something large with a lot of meat on it, you've got to butcher it. That's one of the things you're going to learn. So you've got to be able to be okay with that. Even if you did want a pet, which these are not pets, they are raptors. They are going to eat meat and other animals no matter what. It's my ride. So you might not be allowed to do it. Don't get into it for the wrong reasons. It is very icky. They are not pets. I don't know if I've actually made all these points, but I'm just going to keep going, okay? Also, you're never going to get rich being a falconer. In the US, you are not allowed to use native species for profit. So if I was invited to do a movie with a raptor, it is illegal for me to use Charlie, a native species. Obviously, you see raptors in movies, and they're either not in the US or they're using a non-native species to record from. There's a whole thing regarding that I don't know a whole lot about, because it's kind of not what falconry's for. It's not for profit. It's usually just an expensive hobby. I had to build this facility behind me out of my own pocket, and you know, maybe my dad helped build it a little bit. Well, a lot. But it's built from scratch, and there's a checklist that we had to make sure everything was good for. But we had to spend money to build a housing unit for this raptor. Like I said, I have, you know, a freezer full of dead animals. That's a couple hundred every few months. The larger the bird, the more they're gonna eat, you know, but it's an expense. And all the equipment that you need, the glove, the bells, the jesses, the perches, the bath pan, you know, the astroturf that you have to put on the perches. I mean, these are a lot of one-time purchases. You're going to need gloves regularly, you're going to need jesses regularly. Some people use their gloves a long time, but eventually some of the equipment is going to have to be replaced. If you've seen videos recently, you know that the Muse got knocked into by a big tree, and I'm going to have to repair it. I'm still working on that. So, you know, there are very few jobs in falconry, and the whole point of falconry is to work with these animals in a natural setting. There are some jobs in what's called bird abatement. So you are hired to fly your bird, let's say, over a vineyard where starlings are coming in and eating all the grapes, so they're losing a lot of money to nuisance birds. The problem is, it's often a contracted job. You've got to pay your own taxes on it. You've got to be up when the birds are up, dawn to dusk, because if you don't have a bird actively flying in the air, the nuisance birds just come right back. So it's a lot of work. You've got to have a lot of birds, because no bird is going to be up in the air all day. You're not going to get rich. There might be some pretty lucrative contracts out there, but there's a lot of expense to it, so don't plan on doing that. Now, I did work in like a Renaissance style kind of job that I'm not going to name individually, but I was very fortunate to have one of the very few jobs in falconry. Those were not my birds. I did not get the license through that job, and I learned under a master falconer. I'm not a rich person. It got falconry into my blood enough that I have to keep doing it. It's just a thing now, part of my personality. But it was an entry-level job for a little bit more than entry-level. Who cares? It didn't pay enough to live on by itself. I had supplementary jobs, and you know, the biggest thing was I got to work with cool animals and learn about them and have all these experiences that I never would have had otherwise. But I didn't get rich off that job. You're probably not going to get rich off of bird abatement, and for native species, you're not even allowed legally to profit more than to reimburse the expenses. So don't get into it for money. It's not going to work. Also, you need a veterinarian. You're gonna need one at some point. They don't have to get like yearly shots and checkups like your mammal pets do. Again, not a pet, but if you have to go to the vet, you have to go to a person that specializes in exotic animals, and that can get pricey. So that's another thing that you're gonna have to prepare for. The other thing you've got to realize before you pursue this is that the falconry license only covers having the bird, legally having the bird. In order to hunt it, you also have to get a hunting license. When I got that for the first time, I had to take a hunting safety course for guns to have a bird. Don't want to get too deep into this, but it took me years of work to get a bird when I probably couldn't have gotten a gun the same day. It takes longer to get a bird than a gun. Just putting that out there. That's all I'm gonna say about that. But yeah, I had to get a hunting license. If you want to hunt, like in my area for waterfowl, you have to get kind of an extra hunting license for them. Mine covers ground quarry and like so small fuzzy mammals, basically. That's the kind of bird I have that would typically hunt those things. Now if she hunts something else, then I just have to not move it. You know, I let her eat on it and then that's it. I don't have a license to hunt her, let's say, on ducks. No, she's not made for that. But if I had a falcon, that's what they go after, you know, depending on their size. This is also not the same as like zoo enclosures or educational permits. Like each one allows you to do different things with these animals. It's also not a license to breed them. Falconry is specifically for the intention of hunting them. There's a whole bunch of different rules and regulations that I'm going to touch on, but you're going to have to check out on your own. This video is meant to just be an introduction and like a, you know, how to become a falconer in broad strokes. It's not going to be about how to be a falconer once you've started the process, how to train your bird, how to do things. There's so much I could say on that, but this is specifically going to be for people who want to become or are interested in becoming a falconer, to just explain how this is done. All right, are you still with me? Because that's a lot. If you're no longer interested in this, I totally get it. And please don't do it unless you're going to be dedicated to it, because it does take a lot of work. But if you're still with me, if you're still interested, let's look at each of those three pieces a little bit more in depth. So the test, the facility, and the sponsorship. Alright, so you know how sometimes people joke around and are like, you better pay attention because there's a test at the end. There's actually a test at the end for falconry. Actually, it's in the beginning. There is a, for me it was a 100-question test. It is multiple choice, and you have to get at least an 80% on it, which means you have to study. You have to study a lot. The test is usually the first step that people take to getting the falconry license, but like it's a lot. It's a lot. So at some point, these are from 2014, but at some point I printed out the state and federal guidelines. They're all online, but at the time I just thought it was easier to like highlight and study them from this. There is a recommended reading list. I have read this entire book other than the telemetry. I'll put the, I've linked this below. It's not this exact one. This one's a little out of date now. I think it was written in the 90s, but they keep updating these. It's the Webster and Beebe one. This is like one of the textbooks of falconry. It's honestly the only one I've read cover to cover, except the telemetry, because the telemetry situation was already out of date at the time that I read it, which was between 2007 and 14. Hello? So, and then telemetry has changed since then too. There are going to be some questions on telemetry, but make sure you get like the most up-to-date version. I just opened this. I reread the regulations and everything, but okay, I'm gonna get, I also have essentially 6 pages of notes on yet another source. Like I said, this is federal and state guidelines. It's not just what is falconry or what is it for. It's ecology, it's biology, it's types of species, it's diseases they can get, it's federal regulations, state regulations. Almost, you kind of have to be an almost expert by the time you take this test. I took a practice test, which I'm going to get into in a second, in like 2013-ish. I've been working with raptors since 2005. I've been doing falconry since 2007. Failed the practice test. Failed it. It was just a practice test, so it didn't count towards anything. When I actually took the test, this is good news and bad news, right? When I actually took the test through DNR, you have to set up an appointment, go down to the headquarters. Sorry, DNR is Department of Natural Resources, and I believe that's who coordinates all of the licenses in the US. But I believe there's also federal and local guidelines, like everything else. So the actual like official test, it was 100 questions. I got 99 right. Yeah, pretty proud of that. The bad news is I don't know what question I got wrong. I really want to know. I want to know what question I got wrong. But I think I might know which one it was, and this will give you an idea of how crazy pants this test is. I remember reading about different species and their nesting and, you know, some stuff about that. But there was a question that said, which bird builds the second largest nest in the US? The second largest nest? I remember reading something about the first largest, and they were like making the point that like eagles are the biggest birds, but they don't necessarily build the largest nest. It's like super huge, and I don't remember who actually makes the largest, but yeah, there were only 4 choices, but I probably got that one wrong, because I was just like, second largest nest in the US, like what? But that's a real question. That was a real question on the test. Now, on my state's DNR website, there is a reading list. Honestly, depending on when you're seeing this, I would just look for it online. Suggested reading list for falconry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 different books here. There's others that I know are good, but be careful if you're like looking at books that are like for kids, like Raptors of the World or something, or like, I don't know, something that's kind of not really by a biologist who it might give you bad information. So just, I'd say check your sources, but it's like you're still learning your sources. Also be careful who you follow online, including me. I can be wrong. I could say something wrong in a video. I try to be as accurate as possible, and I've been working with raptors for almost 20 years at this point, so I'm fairly confident putting stuff out there, but there's still a lot I don't know. And I've worked primarily with red tails as far as training goes, and all the falcons that I worked with before that. But I haven't flown falcons completely free yet. Like, there's stuff that I'm still learning. You're constantly going to be learning, but you got to know a lot of stuff to even start. If you fail the test, you are allowed to take it again, but only so many times and in a certain amount of time. Honestly, the best resource that I found to really help me understand the test was a practice test from New York State that is posted online. I checked recently and it's still there, but that's part of these notes that I found. But it gives you the questions, it gives you the answer, and then explains why. So if you just kind of slide the sheet down, or like don't scroll down all the way, you can answer the questions and then see, you know, if you were right or not. And I want to do a full breakdown video where I take that test again and just kind of see if I remember some of this stuff. But here were some examples from the actual New York State test. And it doesn't matter what state you're in, you can look up the test online. Other states may have it as well, but this was just kind of like what I used. I don't know. I forget who told me about it. Probably my mentor at the time. Bird most likely to breed in captivity. Juvenile falconiforms, which you have to know the Latin, was it family and genus species? I don't speak Latin, obviously. Like, nobody really does. Juvenile falcons have longer flight feathers to make up for less muscle, so they're larger than adults. This is a very subtle thing. There's a whole bunch of vocabulary words. A whole bunch of vocabulary words. Even with the disclaimer about I could be wrong, I am making a playlist and have a bunch of videos up about the falconry vocabulary. I try to break it down one by one, so you're free to check that out. There's a lot of them at this point. There's still so many to go. But falconers have been using weird words for things since ancient Egypt. I mean, this is one of the oldest sports in the world. So there's a lot of established information. It's finally starting to update a little bit with the times, but I mean, birds are birds for the most part. These are wild animals. These are not domesticated animals. So the biology has evolved, but like a lot of it is the same, and the words are very different from the vernacular that people may use about birds. So check out that playlist as another source to learn some of these vocabulary words, but I'm going to keep going here just to give you an idea. Incubation periods. I'm serious. How different species hunt, you know, in the forests, in the fields, low to the ground, soaring up above. There's 6 pages of notes. What does it mean if they have long or short toes? Whether to fly in the wind or like downwind or upwind. You're gonna have to learn about species that you will never see or work with. Oh, I found it. I found it on here. Ferruginous hawks build the biggest nests even over eagles and osprey. Ferruginous hawks I've never seen. They live out west in the United States, as far as I know. They're a bootio like a red-tailed hawk. But apparently that's very important to know that ferruginous hawks lay the biggest nests. Who lays the second nest? I don't know. I probably don't have it written down. But you have to know what kind of bird you're looking at or, you know, getting. There's a big difference between the species. So you have to be knowledgeable about all of them because they can live in similar places, but not actually be like ones you're allowed to have. Some of them are protected and endangered, so you really have to know. Things about migration. Which birds are cold hardy or can handle heat? You need to know a little bit about the history of falconry. There's different kinds of jesses and bells and hoods and people that they originated from. There's a lot of different kinds of trapping and nets. There's different kinds of diseases, like I said, aspergillosis, coccidia, flounce, bumblefoot. You don't have to pronounce it right, but you gotta know what it is. Okay, so those were my notes from the practice test. This is the recommended reading list. These are the state guidelines. These are the federal guidelines. I have a whole folder full of papers, permits, and this book is 386 pages. Text book. It's big. And that's just the start of it. Okay, if you're still with me, the next step that people usually take is to build something to house your bird. Obviously, for quality of care, DNR wants to make sure that what you have is appropriate for your bird. So not only do you have to build a facility, you have to build it within certain guidelines and then get it inspected by the Department of Natural Resources. She's going in her water. Are you just the cutest, prettiest thing? So yeah, so there's an entire inspection sheet that you can get in order to make sure you pass this inspection. This facility has been passed, obviously, because I have my license. I am planning a video where I'm going through everything on the checklist. I'm purposefully being vague about which state I'm in because there's not many of us, and just for safety reasons for both me and my animals. For some reason, the first inspection sheet that I have looks like a dog ate my homework. I did find my actual one where I passed the inspection. I'll try to include a picture of it or a picture's a part of it so that you can see some of it. Like I said, I'm going to go into an entire list and show you in the Muse like where those features are. First thing is Muse versus weathering area. I do have a Falconry Words video about this, but the Muse is an indoor area. Now this is a shed outside, it's not insulated, but it's something that I can close off and have her under a roof, you know, completely in a shelter. Oh, there she goes. Yeah, there she is. There's poop in here. There's always going to be poop in here. Even when you clean it, there's immediately poop in here. All right, so this is a working, living Muse. I do not have, we usually call it the Muse, even though we mean the indoor and the outdoor area. The outdoor area is technically called a weathering area. What I do with her is not what most people do, to be honest. I free loft her, meaning she's free to go anywhere she wants in here. And this is a 10-foot by 10-foot outdoor dog run that I had to alter to meet the standards and get inspected. And it is connected to the Muse. I can shutter open the door so she can be completely contained, but most people will either just have them in an indoor area and maybe free loft them in there, but most people in a weathering area would have them leashed to a perch so they can get around a little bit, you know, and sit on the ground, but it's meant kind of like it's like a sun station, you know, where they can just be out in the elements a little bit more. But I gave her the full run of the whole thing. That is both specific to Charlie and specific to how I've trained her and learned. My very first falconry mentor, he free lofted his birds. He had Harris hawks. My current mentor, I think he does it depending on the season, and he kind of has a mews and weathering area combined, which is possible as well. But the mews, your indoor facility, is some people, like with kestrels especially, the little tiny falcons, they have to keep them indoors. Their mews is in their house, basically. But they have to also have a weathering area so that their birds aren't just sitting in a corner in their house. You know, that's not good for the bird. Probably not the human either. The mews has to be a certain size, depending on your bird. Has to have at least one window. These vertical bars are required so that when your bird flies against the window, it doesn't hit wire. It would hit these protective bars and not be able to grab on them either. It would just gently slide down the window. Now I'm in the process of fixing the side of the mews from the tree falling on it, so I have to redo that window. It's functional now, but I have to legally get those bars up on that window. Charlie doesn't fly into the windows. She knows where the windows are. I housed a little male red tail in here for a little bit who was flying into everything, although I had to have him leashed most of the time, and I didn't have him for very long because I found Charlie again. That's a story for you. But anyway, I've got to put it back to regulation. Okay, now they could come out and inspect it any time. They can allow you a certain amount of time to get things right, but generally, you know, if something goes wrong with your mews or housing, like you want to have it within 30 days, you have to have a certain number of perches, you have to have gloves and leashes and jesses and stuff on hand so that you can, leash them if they need to be leashed. Out here is a little different. It has to be protected up to a certain number of feet. I'll get into it, but it's all online somewhere, I'm sure, for your state. It's probably going to be pretty similar. Please put the bars on the inside of the windows. It doesn't do you any good if it's on the outside of the wire. Make your own mews, because if you try to tell someone, this happened at my job. We said the vertical bars are required. They didn't understand why, and they put the wire on the inside and the bars on the outside. So the birds were going to smack into the wire, and the bars did no good except for technically being there. That was a whole thing. They're going to have to change it. That was a long time ago. I'm sure it's like better now. So basically, I mean, this protects from the biggest elements, wind, rain, snow. Now, she's down here again, she likes to sit in the weather, and then she roosts, she goes into her mews overnight. She just does that on her own. Sometimes you'll have to, pick the bird up to do that, or after your feeding session, you'll have to put him back in there. But all that biology stuff that we learned from the test, you learn about the day to night cycles and like what starts them molting, and then what's the start of the falconry season, and yeah, there's a lot. But you need somewhere where they're protected from the elements, at least partially. When it gets too cold, I do take her inside our human shed in a specific area. I have some videos about that. I'm not going to get into that right now, but we kind of become meteorologists and, spend a lot of time adjusting and building and taking care of the mews. I have probably 1,000 zip ties in this outdoor area, and I have to make sure that if they're clipped, they're not too sharp. So if she flies on them, they don't hurt her. So every zip tie is like specifically placed. Yeah. So the last step you need before you actually physically get an apprentice falconry license is a sponsor. This is hard to kind of give a lot of guidance about. I'm going to try, and just like the test and the inspection, I'm going to try to make a whole separate video about this. Falconers tend to be solo. The birds, Charlie is an exception. She still doesn't like when people get too close to her, but she's okay with them around for the most part if she's in the right mood. A lot of birds will not accept a lot of commotion or other people around them. I mean, they're predatory animals in the wild. They are always going to think in that way. We do, however, kind of know where others are, other falconers are. We collaborate a little bit. Online is a great place these days to find other falconers, even if you're following their YouTube channels. My state does have a list of falconers accepting apprentices. Now, let me just make sure that's clear. The first falconry license you get is an apprentice license. You are apprenticing under your sponsor. So it's an apprenticeship for you, but it's a sponsorship at the same time. Unfortunately, the website with the list of sponsors is often out of date. I know our state rep just put out an email to try to update it a little bit, but it's a place to start, and they may put you in contact with other falconers. Honestly, by the time you're looking for your sponsorship, when you've built a facility, when you've passed the test, you've already been around these birds somewhat with people who are working with them. Another good way to get some experience is to volunteer. My first 2 years working with raptors was at a wildlife rehabilitation center. I volunteered there first, and then I got hired pretty quickly, but that's also a rare thing. And zoos have some volunteer positions usually. But you need to know so much that, the experience is really how you're going to get there. A lot of the studying is too, but no amount of studying. You can learn, read about how to drive a car, but when you actually go to drive a car, it's different. So we learn from each other. And the birds, obviously, they're our biggest teachers. Your sponsor needs to be knowledgeable and correct. There's not much you can have some leeway on. You've really got to know what you're talking about. And it's got to be somebody you trust. Especially in certain situations when, you're going out in the middle of the woods with just one other person. Probably should feel safe. Also, don't let them bully you. I have some wonderful people that I have met in falconry. I've also met some not so wonderful people. I'm not trying to get political or anything, but being a female in falconry does make me have to think about things that male falconers don't. Right now, the falconry population, for the most part, are retired white men. And that's not a judgment, that's just a fact. There's not many people of color, there's not many women, although we're getting in there. We really are. It's funny because historically, just real quick, females went hawking, flying, hunting, and all these, you'll read about it in medieval books and stuff. Like I said, all the way back to ancient Egypt. Ironically, the females would have the smaller birds usually, and the males would have the larger birds, but it doesn't matter anyway. So females, have traditionally always done this, but you're kind of at a disadvantage. I'm a lot younger than most falconers. I'm in my 40s, but, luckily, I don't look it yet, I don't think. Someone who can sponsor you has to have had their license for at least 2 years. The license beyond the apprentice license. You go from an apprentice to a general to a master. A general can't sponsor until they've had the general's license for 2 years, which means a minimum of 4 years of falconry because the apprenticeship is 2 years. My apprenticeship was longer than that. No, there was some toxic drama. It goes with the first thing I was trying to say, which is don't let people bully you. If you don't know something, you should be able to express it in a constructive way, and they should be able to respond to you in a constructive way. So don't feel like you're stuck with a sponsor because they're the only one you could find. If they're not a good match for you, then do it elsewhere. And really, it has nothing to do with gender in a lot of instances. It's a very personalized sport. Your relationship with your bird is the only one that they have, and it's a very special thing. I mean, even working with them for almost 20 years, every time she flies to me is incredible, you know. But I've had falconers make me feel like I don't know a damn thing. And I will definitely admit when I don't know something, and you'll hear me on the free flight videos asking my sponsor, well, was my sponsor, I'm just kind of trying to call him my mentor now, but once a sponsor, always a sponsor. My mentor, I mean, I'm constantly asking him things, because getting out hunting with her is a lot different than just getting her to fly to my glove. I mean, you'll see if you go watch those videos. Finding a sponsor is getting easier with social media, but be careful if you're alone in the woods with a person you don't know very well. You know, you're gonna have to kind of spend some time with them, obviously, before they become your sponsor, because if they don't know who you are, like, why would they sign on to that? Because they're basically signing on to be your teacher for the next 2 years to help you get good at the falconry world. When you've passed the test, passed the inspection, and you have a letter from a sponsor, you can get a falconry license. It is your apprentice license, so you have to have a supervisor, a sponsor, okay? 2 years after that, you're a grown-up falconer, and you can get a general license. I think I talked earlier in the video about how as an apprentice you can only get a kestrel, red-tail, or red-shouldered hawk, which almost nobody does. You can only have one bird at a time as an apprentice, so you can't have both a kestrel and a red-tail, you have to have one. When you become a general, which is what I am currently, you can get up to 3 birds. 5 years that you've had a general license, you can have a master falconer license, which just sounds cool, come on. So if you're a master falconer, which is what my current mentor is, you can get up to 5 birds. There may be some differences if there's non-native species. I'm not going to go into that. Once you obtain a sponsor, which you've probably had some kind of friendship with prior, you're going to physically have the license. And then you can physically get your bird. You can have it transferred from somebody else. You can have it placed to you from a wildlife rehabilitation center. But most people will trap them from the wild. And I have to check the trapping regulations as far as like what requires additional permitting and what doesn't. But there's lots of different traps that I'm not going to go into right now. Your sponsor is going to be the one to help you get your first bird, unless you know, have an arrangement somehow otherwise. Remember, at this point, I mean, you haven't even gotten the license yet, and you've already done all of these other things. You've studied a lot about this, and the networking with others is going to be difficult, especially when you're in the middle of nowhere and there might not be other falconers around. You're going to know a bunch by the time you're ready to get your bird, and that's how it should be, honestly. Like, you need to know what you're doing, because this can be potentially dangerous as well. You are not allowed to get, no, eagles are like by far the biggest raptor that you can fly, I believe. There's some owls that are quite large too, but you can't even get eagles as a master falconer without a special permit, at least in our state. Also, you can start your apprenticeship as early as 14 years old in my state, so you'd technically be a general falconer at 16. There's a lot of safety concerns with that as well. This usually happens when a parent is a falconer, though, and like their kid is, you know, getting interested in it. Yeah, be safe, please. Just to be around these birds, you know, but make sure that the humans you're around are also a good fit. So hopefully some people are still here at the end of this video who are interested in falconry. It is an amazing thing to be a part of. It takes a lot of work, as you've heard, but in my eyes and all of those of us with the license, it's worth it. Every time she flies to my glove on command, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I've taught so many people about it, gotten them up close to a red-tailed hawk, just, you know, sitting there like me controlling the situation. It's just, it's like a religious experience for some people to get close to these falcons and hawks, and you know, it's a little different if I was, say, like an aardvark trainer or something. No shade to aardvarks, but like falconry is something a little bit more special than anything else. So I hope you learned a lot from this video. Go ahead and subscribe, because I am going to have videos coming out where I, in detail, go into the 3 steps that I outlined. There's a lot more to learn, and there's a lot more I could say about actually being a falconer and what you have to do on a daily basis and like all of this stuff. But this is just supposed to be a thorough introduction, but an introduction to how to be a falconer, what the steps are, what you can expect, but you've actually got to go in and do the work. So good luck. Please feel free to leave any questions you might have. I can direct you to some more resources. I don't know how long it's going to take to come out with the other videos, but like I said, I do have a whole playlist of the falconry words. I have one of the falconry flights. I have one of some falconry behind the scenes stuff. So check all that out. We come out with a video on Fridays about my animals. I try to make it a Falconry Friday, but there's only a few months of the year that's actually when we're actively training and hunting them. That's different for some people and some birds. But typically the fall and winter is when we're flying, so we're in the off season. So it might not be a Falconry Friday every Friday, but we try to have falconry content. And also on Sundays, it's either one. And we do artistic like makeup stuff on Tuesdays, which, let's face it, if you're here to be a falconer, you're probably not as much interested in that, but that's kind of the spectrum of my life, is art and animals. So here we are at FlyOn. Hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for watching, and bye. I'm gonna do something. So let's get going. I don't like that. One more for good luck. Actual falconry bits. No, I don't like that. I'm gonna stop. What was I saying before that? Was it important? Alright, I can't tell if I have glitter or mosquitoes on me. I have some glitter here. There's cicadas talking to each other loudly. Here's the first thing you need as a falconer is patience. You need to be in the next set of the oh, my candle blew out. My citronella candle blew out. Hold on, we need this thing in here because I'm dying. I'm dying. You are at the mercy of nature. But the heck was that? Make sure your bird is used to distractions. My goodness. She's better at it than I am. What was I saying? I definitely don't remember now. Holy crap. It's gotta be a bus or a truck. That is bananas how loud that was. There is a train nearby, but not in my street. You're okay. No, this is not food, look. Then get it inspected by the Department of National... That department. That one that I just said. Sorry, there's been some like gas explosions and stuff from like whole houses, like not too far from me, and it's terrifying. And I just heard a huge boom, but hopefully it wasn't that. I am kind of not as... My current mentor, he free lofts them. My current mentor... 2 years after that, you're a grown-up. You can only have one bird at a time. One bird. Oh, I think it's like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Gotta wait for the church bells. And the cicadas. And the train. All we need are police cars and a helicopter. That's the train noise. Whatever that was not. Please, My battery's at like 20%. And there's fire. Are you kidding me? Maybe they're having a bonfire. Introduction, but an introduction to cars and motorcycles and noises. Why did I decide to do this outside? I don't know. A thorough introduction, but